It's said that the first experience that we have of love, that first primitive notion of our own acceptability, is a felt sense that we got as an infant on the breast. It's interesting that that first sense of connection is tied up with us being nourished. A small infant doesn't have a sense of the world around it. It doesn't even have a sense of who mum is really. All it knows is that when I'm hungry, there's a breast that appears or doesn't appear. And dependent on my relationship with the breast, that informs my early ideas of my own acceptability and my faith in the world around me. As we get older, that breast, the mother, becomes our community. And interestingly enough, the way we strengthen our bonds with community is usually tied in with nourishment. When you think of any major life event like a celebration, a birthday, a wedding, covenants between each other, it could be funerals even. We come together and we break bread, we share food. We still express our love through nourishing others. Food is all about community. There's a food historian called Michael Twitty, and he said, cooking is the heart and soul of our culture. It's how we connect with our past and our future. Our plates tell a story of who we are. If we think of Jamaica's motto is out of many, one people. There's so many influences from different cultures. When you look at a Jamaican's plate, roti is popular in Jamaica. Where did that come from? Jerk is popular in Jamaica. Where did that come from? Even the word to eat, nyam, where did that come from? It's a way how we strengthen our sense of identity, and identity is relational. There's no identity in isolation. And when we look at things like kosher food, or halal even, let's take a look at kosher. If I'm a religious Jew and someone is selling beef, which is a kosher animal, if they didn't prepare the meat in the right way, I can't eat from them. If they don't salt it, drain the blood, I can't eat it. If they did that, but they didn't slaughter the cow in the right way, it's not kosher, I can't eat it. If they slaughtered the cow in the right way and they prepared it correctly, but they weren't a Jew, I still can't eat from them. You might think that's a bit extensive, but think about what that does culturally and in terms of a community. That means I'm only spending my money and I'm only allowing one of my own to sustain me. That not only strengthens my bonds with my brethren, but that also communicates who's not one of us. And it's not just religion. There's no shortage of stories of people who've become vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, or they changed their diet in some way, stopped eating a certain type of meat. When they go home to their families, it's a big issue because the family feels like, well, it's like you're separating yourself from us. You're not a part of our customs, our traditions anymore. It feels like they're being awkward. It feels like they're being adversarial even. So that just shows how important food is to us. And the idea of eating together, in other words, a commensality, is not just within the family. It's also found in politics as well. This idea of community and acceptability, as was experienced hopefully on the breast, is still being sold to us. Something interesting is, I recently looked up the brand statements of major food chains, fast food chains. And interestingly enough, even though majority are selling foods that are terrible for us, destructive to our health, the brand messages have a heavy emphasis on community. They have a heavy emphasis on identity, which is, again, connected to community. If I have an identity, there are people like me who I connect with. So in other words, on the surface they're selling you food, they're selling you a beverage, they're selling you a burger, but on some deep level it's like they're selling you love. That's what it's packaged as, at least. And I also looked at the brand messages for some weight loss products and programs. I found less of an emphasis on community and more a message that was saying, here's our product, use this if you want to be acceptable. That's usually the message behind losing weight, if you want to be acceptable. But even if that's the individual goal, being acceptable to who? A community. The funny thing is, we're being sold community by people who could care less for our nutrition. And that brings me to my final point. Something interesting that I find in different cultures. Here we have a very individualistic culture, yeah? And I was told a story about a person who came to the UK from an Eastern culture, Middle Eastern. And where he was living, people thought he was stealing from their plates. But actually, it was his culture and custom to eat together. The food on the table was for everyone. So that was what he was doing. It was strange to him that everyone had individual plates that they all ate off individually. And when I look at Ethiopia, there's something called gursha, where if I have an affinity for you or an affection for you, maybe you're a friend, a family member, or someone that I'd like, I'll feed you with my hand. Like, how beautiful of a display of affection is that? And even there, people will sit around one plate and they will each take. Our nourishment being so heavily tied in with our ideas of being lovable and loving and being acceptable and accepting. When you look at your plate, what does that say about your history? When you're cooking, do you cook as though you're cooking for someone that you love? Or are you cooking as though you're just trying to keep a body alive? The way we nourish ourselves and the care we take to nourish ourselves is an act of self-love. And while we can extend that to others, it's important that we extend that to ourselves first. Because as I mentioned, food is communicative. It communicates our bonds, it communicates who our enemies are, it differentiates us from others. So when we're consuming, we're also communicating something to ourselves. It's my belief that everyone should know how to cook and prepare food, but maybe that's not your strong point. I think something worth mentioning is that nourishing your community doesn't just have to be with food. Another way that we can express our love is to uplift people, to leave people better than we found them, to inform the next generation. So before we even learn to cook, the starting point might be the intention to promote health within yourself and those around you. There's much more I would love to talk about with food that I didn't get to say in this video, but if it's a conversation you would like to have, let us know. And if food is something that you're struggling with, you can always reach out to Perch Therapy.